back in the day, when I, like about 2008, 2009, when we thought about a database, well, the internet was, it was very much a thing, of course, but the idea of having a database and so on, we weren't connected well enough and so on. The concept of actually saying, oh, no, we just want to run stuff in the cloud was not really a thing. Sure, we would run something in a data center, but that data center was one that, we controlled. And in many ways, of course, when we think about the cloud, it's just other people's computers, right? And there isn't necessarily a big difference between, in some ways, there isn't really a big difference between having computers in, under your desk, hopefully not, but, we've all seen that if you're old enough. The server under the desk running all your critical systems, to the server in the server room, just down the corridor, to the server room, in the basement, or, or at Internode or wherever, or in the case of Azure, in an Azure data center in Sydney or Melbourne or wherever, right? In many ways, it's just other people's computers. If you're talking IaaS and just going, we're just doing infrastructure as a service and we're just kind of spinning up VMs, but essentially we're running everything as if it were on-prem. That's not really where I want to be spending a whole bunch of time thinking today. However, that might be your cloud story, and that's perfectly fair enough. Are there conversation things going on? Are you jumping into the meetings and chatting?
No, I'm checking a few things. Cool.
So what I want to do is I want to quickly draw here the concept of going, come on, draw. Right. So if we've got a server, right, which is our database server, used to be that we'd be like, oh, okay, so we've got like, why is this not drawing nicely? Draws nicely there. I reckon I'm just kind of leaning on it strangely. It's the angle. What I should do, I should turn this around. It's a new laptop. It's the first time I've actually gone this way with it. For those looking at home, I've got one of these HP Spectres, and it's like a 2-in-1. I've kind of turned it into tablet mode. Oh, and it's trying to rotate for me. I apologize. I love it as opposed to a tablet which only goes in clamshell mode. Is that what it's called? Mm. Because if I'm in a meeting with people, this looks no different to them writing on paper. It's just that they can read their notes because they've got better handwriting. No, because it's just that mine is stored electronically, and that's really convenient. Mm. I just haven't done that with this machine because I only bought it a couple of weeks ago. And in fact, I bought a Copilot Plus PC, thinking, well, Microsoft's pushing it fairly hard at the moment.
Any different?
Could not install SQL on it. Could not install half the Adobe products on it. Couldn't run OBS properly for video stuff. And
changing it.
There's supposed to be Prism emulators in Windows 11 24H2 to make that stuff work. I was running 24H2, but nope, stuff just wasn't playing along nicely. I went, well, I'll try Docker. Nope, that didn't start either. I tried the Azure SQL Edge image on Docker, and that would run, but the newest image it would pull was 2 years old, running SQL 2019, like version 15 of SQL. And I was just like, yeah, no.
Is that a chip thing? Is
so it's an ARM chip,
yeah.
But the theory is that these things should now work okay.
On ARM, yeah.
It's just that nothing's really supported, and there were just too many products across too many vendors and so on. I'm just like, yeah, no, I'm gonna. So I took it back and I got HP Spectre, which is basically the newer version of my old machine, and I'm totally fine with it. But yeah, so I'm going to try drawing, and we'll see how we go. So on-prem, we'd have our server, and we'd have like SQL, the SQL database on there, running our database and so on. We'd have so I've got a list. We'd have SQL. We'd have we'd have SQL Agent. I don't know what. Yeah, let me change the pen I'm using. Let me switch to that pen. See if that. It still doesn't. I reckon it's the pen. Oh my goodness, no! It just tried to convert the thing. This just means I needed to have gone into all the settings of OneNote to be like. Do you see it's written the word agent in text there, which means it's trying to auto convert.
But I think that's one of the pens. So one of the pens is actually pen.
Because I picked that one with an A on it.
Yeah,
oh, right,
that's
gotcha.
the next one.
So I'm gonna
maybe go the third one, but then maybe lower the width of the pen.
I want to try and delete this. Better. So I'll go here. Yeah, I'll pick that one and I'll just make it smaller.
Less thicker here.
And we'll just see if it becomes kind of. I think it's just the pen. It's an old pen and it's just not writing consistently. That kind of sucks. I'm gonna. Maybe I won't draw. Maybe I'll just effectively create slides instead. Right. So we would have I will type words and I will occasionally draw boxes around them. It'll be fine. And I will figure out what the deal is with this pen, which seems to work sometimes, but not consistently. Anyway, we'd have a server, right? Much larger text so that you can read it. We'd have a server that would have SQL Server installed on it. And with SQL Server, we would have multiple databases. I will fix up the typing later. We'd have SQL Agent. We'd have reporting services. We'd have analysis services. It's on a Windows machine, so we'd probably have the file system.
Integration services.
Oh, yeah, sure. Let's mention integration services, by all means. We'd have integration services. Integration services. Wow, apparently, pain is the whole thing. And there was no problem being able to use different styles of databases. There was no problem being able to say, well, this one is very transactional, and we'd have other ones that were kind of optimized in some ways for analytical workloads, right? I don't mean just analysis services running as itself. I just mean even a traditional database, but with a data warehouse design running on there. Not something that, like, we could have stuff that was optimized for heavy transactional workloads and have stuff that was optimized for analytical workloads with more RAM, and potentially we wouldn't worry about having, such fast disk. We'd think about being able to do memory intensive hash joins and so on, where you're aggregating across all kinds of stuff. Over time, we got things like the column store indexing, right? Which was a new kind of compression thing that came through in 2012. And you're trying to take pictures of my presentation now. Terrifying. I should hang up.
Yeah, got it.
I don't know why I do these things. But and so lots of features were getting built into the SQL engine and the other tools sitting around it that were really helping in all kinds of ways. And in fact, with analysis services, we had data mining, right? I'll say like plus data mining bits in there. In like integration services, we had things like fuzzy logic, and so on. And then of course, as things moved across to being in the cloud, they're not lined up. How much do I care? They're not going to line up. That's all right. In the cloud, we got a few things. We got Azure SQL database, right? Oh, I'm just going to go, yeah, SQL database, which was a single database, right? A single database that was not integrated with your Active Directory on-prem. So all of a sudden we had moved already kind of from using SQL logins to using Windows logins because it was more secure and so on-prem. And went to the cloud and we lost that. We had to suddenly be using SQL logins again. It's like, wait, what the heck? But single database. The concept of being able to go, well, I've got some stuff in one database and some stuff in another, and I can just use three-part naming convention in my on-prem environment. We went to the cloud and all of a sudden we don't have that. And we had to suddenly be dealing with, how are we going to go across other databases? And we didn't have SQL agent, and we didn't have analysis services. And when we first got cloud databases, well, Azure SQL database was kind of it. Funnily enough, a lot of people were just like, I don't know if it's for me. I remember presenting at that TechEd thing, just going, okay, but in some ways you've got to be thinking, who's looking after your database from like a pure DBA perspective? Because if it's Azure SQL database, Microsoft is managing that for lots of players, millions of people these days, like millions of organizations these days. Back then, I think it was already thousands. And so they're looking after you just as well as they look after some bank or whoever. But if you're on-prem, who's looking after that? Barry in IT? Do they outsource it to some company down the road who you don't really trust? Like they don't get you and what you're trying to do with your data? Like, is it tuned just the way that you want it, with the right disk that you want and all that kind of stuff to get exactly what you want? Well, maybe you've got some amount of control over things if you're on-prem, and in the cloud you go, well, how much do I really care about that? Is it going to be good enough if it's in the cloud, but then I don't have to worry about it being looked after by somebody who I don't really trust? But, does that mean there's no downtime? No, of course not. Oh my goodness, of course not. I nearly said this is Microsoft we're talking about. No. But of course there's downtime, not because it's Microsoft. Microsoft is actually really good at avoiding downtime. Because, there are still mistakes. But if you remember when there's mistakes in your on-prem environment, it's a whole lot worse than mistakes in Azure. They get onto that stuff really quickly. You don't find that you get in on a Monday and you go, oh yeah, so we've been down since like Friday night. That doesn't happen. And it used to happen way too much. Not just the sites I looked after. I mean, I was never just a pure DBA. That was never my job. I was an applications person. And databases were the things that supported what I did. I do presentations around the place about who owns your database to DBAs. And they're like, well, we do. I'm just like, really? I think it's your application developers. I think they're the people who you need to ask permission from to be able to create an index, change some configuration, restart a service if you need to, whatever. It's not you. You just make sure that their stuff is taken care of, but it's their stuff. It's not your stuff, it's their stuff.
Well,
it's contentious. Right. But at some point along the way, I worked out that really the thing that matters most is the data. And that if I was going to specialize in something, data was actually a good thing to do. And it was kind of when I left being the colleague of Steve and Reed at the time as well, that I kind of left being an applications person and became a dedicated database specialist. And at the time, that included reporting services, analysis services, and so on, because this was 2007. The cloud wasn't really a thing. Everything was still very much on-prem. BI was an on-prem story, and so on. And then the cloud came, and we only had Azure SQL Database. And people were just like, oh, but we can't move our stuff there because it's not quite right. We did, although, get SQL Server on Azure virtual machines, right? Which is basically that IaaS thing we're talking. It's kind of going to the cloud when you're not going to the cloud. It's going, we don't want to have to buy servers anymore, but really you're running everything as if it's on-prem. You still need to sort out your licensing and all that kind of stuff. You've got a computer that has services on it, and you've got to make sure they are running, and Microsoft won't do that for you. You're really just, replacing having a computer. It's not the same. Whereas Azure SQL Database runs on Linux, did you know? It doesn't even run on Windows, it runs on Linux. But SQL runs okay on Linux. It's a thing. I don't on this machine at the moment. On my old machine, which actually is still in my bag because this is too new for me to not still have my old machine with me. I have Docker running on there, and Linux images inside Docker running SQL because I can. It's really convenient for patching and all that kind of stuff, and I just run a line of code and it patches it. I don't have to download the new cumulative update and then all of that, and then run the install and next and all that kind of stuff. No, I just go, Docker pull latest image, and it does it. It's great. It's about 3 lines, and then I drop the old image and restart the new one, and it's great. It's done. So for a long time, I felt like this was it with SQL, and people were not really going, yes, I totally want to go to the cloud. People were still like, no, I don't know if it's for me, right? And then along the way, they come up with Azure SQL Managed Instance. Managed instance, we'll go singular. Because this over here, I shouldn't use that. This over here, what you've got on the server, this is a SQL instance. You can have multiple instances on a server, but it's an instance, that thing that you connect to. It's either default name or you've named it something and it's server / whatever. But it's an instance, multiple databases, SQL agent, all that, all your TempDB and all that kind of stuff is what we call a SQL instance. Managed instance is that, but in the cloud. So you've got multiple databases, right? You've even got a SQL agent, which is great. And in many ways, if you're looking to do a kind of like a lift and shift from, well, this bit of SQL on-prem, then managed instance is probably the easiest to make that work with. It's not the cheapest, but it's probably the easiest for you to handle because at the end of the day, it looks and feels the same. I encourage a lot of people to look at managed instances just if they are really application people and they're going, yeah, but how does it talk between there and there and there and there? It's just like, okay. Managed instances is an easy thing. That means that you don't really have to redesign lots of stuff to make it work. It'll be fine. Because it's either that or they go to a VM and then they may as well still be on-prem. Because they're running on a VM anyway on-prem, right? And that's being run at some data center somewhere, I don't know, Adam, wherever, It's you're all local people, right? Yeah, so I can say Adam. Simon's dropped off. He's gone to
with the pool.
He's probably dropped his phone in the pool. Lost his connection. We're going to watch Wales or something like that. Not Wales, the game where they played against
Not Wales.
Macedonia last night and won, I think. I think it was Macedonia. Craig Belling's first win as manager. I think it was 2-1. Maybe? I can't remember. I saw this morning Wales had won a football game. Proper football, the round one. None of this pointy thing. The thing is that, and over time, of course, which is some of the stuff that I want to really get into today, the other offerings in the cloud include things like Azure, no, we're getting there. Azure Database for Postgres.
Cool.
Yep, Azure Database. The keys are in slightly different places. This keyboard is, yeah, MySQL. MariaDB. Oracle Database at Azure. It's not Azure Database for Oracle. No, it's Oracle Database at Azure. A couple of years ago, Larry Ellison rocked up at a Microsoft conference and they say, look, you can run Oracle on our stuff now. It's like, serious? What the heck? Which is basically people going, basically Microsoft going, there are people who are not happy with the idea of SQL Server because they go, apparently Oracle's the best. They could still run on our stuff. That's all right. They can come and they can just use Azure, and we know that we're never going to get them off Oracle, but yeah, whatever. They can still come here. So they have Oracle Database at Azure. I don't know why it's got a different naming convention like that. And yeah, and no spaces between that around the at, so it looks like a badly done email address. But it's a thing. From a pure database perspective, relational database, this is almost the whole story. But there's another kind of on-prem thing that I want to mention over here, which is not quite like single server thing, but there was a thing called MPP, which is massively parallel processing. We had a thing called PDW, the Parallel Data Warehouse, which was basically a company would drop $500,000 worth of kit and get a rack system which had 3 copies of SQL Server on it. One which was a control node, and then 2 that were compute nodes, and it was extendable, which meant that you could have up to petabytes of data with across lots and lots and lots of these compute nodes. And this was a on-prem system, and the promise was that it would run hundreds of times faster. Are you on your phone as well to be able to let people in or monitor questions or whatever as they come through?
Yeah, the chat. Someone, I think.
And you buy a piece of kit through HP, or in Steve's case on the line, Dell, and for a little while, if you bought one of these, if a customer bought one of these within anywhere from India across to New Zealand, I would go in there and they'd get 2 weeks of my time to try to get them started with this stuff. The promise was it would run hundreds of times faster than regular SQL, but basically what it was is that it had column store in it. 4 column store was in regular SQL Server. But the concept is because the idea of this was the data is spread across multiple SQL instances, multiple SQL actual computers, different servers within this rack system. And then the control node would be like, oh, you've asked me this query. The data is spread across these. Okay, right. I'm going to tell the compute nodes to do this and this and this and this and send data across from there to there and then bring that back up, and then we'll count them and we'll give the answer back. And there was this whole orchestration thing going on. And it was really good at handling the billions of rows of data that would mean that a regular box just didn't really handle it very well. But because it was so expensive and so on, I don't know whether it ever really caught on. I could mention on here like master data services as well. I don't think I'll bother because there isn't really a cloud equivalent of that. So then at some point, Microsoft decided to go, let's just bring out this thing called SQL Data Warehouse, right? Which was which was still a relational system, but it was the cloud version of PDW. When this got announced, I was running a course for HP in Colombo in Sri Lanka. And they made the announcement. And on like the last day of the course I was running for partners based in Sri Lanka, and on behalf of HP, and the HP guy called me over like an hour later when the course wrapped up, and just like, what the heck? And I was like, yeah, it's news to me as well, but and I never again taught PDW because the bottom just totally fell out of the market.
Yeah.
No one was going to drop $500,000 worth of cash on a system that they could just get on a subscription. It was just like, we don't care that it's like expensive to run this. We'd have to run it for quite a while to make the amount of dollars that we'd have to spend on it to get it working on-prem. And but yeah, and the Microsoft salespeople used to sell it based on it's going to go so much faster. And quite often, the people that I would be dealing with, it wasn't the right solution for them. It was just a thing that was the latest thing that was being sold. And I don't know if any of you dealt with SQLDW, but essentially what would happen is that somebody would be signing up for, cloud. They'd be like, oh yeah, we'll do this in the cloud. That's fine. We want a data warehouse. And instead of being able to go, well, we've got a different workload of stuff here in this database. We've got a data warehouse, a database called DW in our standard SQL Server environment, and it's fine. And they'd be like, I'm spinning up something in the cloud. I can pick either SQLDB or SQLDW. I'm doing a data warehouse. I should pick SQLDW. Except really, if you were dealing with less than maybe 4 terabytes of data, SQL Data Warehouse was not the right answer. You should have just been going SQLDB instead. These days, and then over time, when Synapse came up, this got kind of abandoned or rebranded. It became a thing called Dedicated SQL Pool in Azure Synapse, bracket, formerly known as SQLDW, was its official name. The product formerly known as the artist from Minnesota. Something. And this was the thing. This was still massively parallel, so you need to do all the coordination and so on across 60 copies of SQL. And people would be going, I've got like 20 gig of data for my data warehouse, and they'd be trying to put it in there. They'd be like, why is it so slow? And having conversations with people in Adelaide, I'm just like, it's the wrong product. Like, okay, so what are you doing is your distribution keys, and someone they're just like, the what's? I'm just like, yeah, see, this is not the right answer for you. We also had serverless SQL pool in Synapse, which is not really SQL. It's just kind of a SQL front end to other stuff. And now that we've got Fabric, these products have just kind of stopped. They're still running, I should say. They're still running, but do not start a thing using either of these. The products are, I don't want to say they've end of life them because I don't think they officially have, but no one's working on them anymore. They are not releasing any more stuff on it. The team for these products is no longer. They live in a thing called Microsoft Fabric now, which is the new analytics environment. Everything analytics within Microsoft is now branded as Fabric, which means if you're looking for analytics to give you secret messages into your business, well, now they're all fabricated. That makes it sound like they're false. But you know what I mean? It's a horrible name. Is this on the record? Probably is if it's going to be recorded and put onto YouTube. I don't like the name Microsoft Fabric. I think it's a rubbish name, but I've told people at Microsoft this. and they just laugh at me and just go, yeah, don't. Anyway, that's fine. We're being recorded. I won't be too negative about this. I don't like the name.
Simon needs some homework to do when he comes back. So
Simon's gonna be able to.
he's a video editing pro.
It's 4. I can't remember. Sorry.
He's a video editing pro.
He's gonna get out his copy of Camtasia, and he's gonna go, okay, let's just like edit that bit out, that bit out.
He's more pro than Camtasia, so
okay, sure.
yeah, he'll probably would do.
Sure. He's a good guy, Simon. He's send his drones up, all that kind of stuff. For those of you who don't know, Simon does drone photography. He lives down near Moana or something like that, and he takes amazing photos with a drone, and he's very talented with that. I don't think he should use the drone on the ship.
I think you're actually allowed to
on a cruise ship.
I don't think you're actually allowed to board with a drone these days.
You're not?
Some cruise
No, no.
lines.
How does it work? So suppose the drone's going along, and then you're on there and you fly a drone up. Does it suddenly go backwards if the ship's going that way? Is that how that works?
Sure, I haven't tried.
You know how when you're...
You have to get a follow me drone.
Ooh. For those of you at home, Reed has just pulled a drone out of his pocket. That sounds wrong.
You want? I bought it for my holiday that I'm going on next on Friday.
You're going on a cruise ship?
That's 136 grams, the lightest.
136.
Yeah.
It's a DJI. I have a gimbal, a DJI gimbal.
Yeah, it's got a gimbal. It's got a gimbal camera on the front, but I've got the Mini 2, and I upgraded to this one.
That's very nice. Okay.
Sorry, off topic.
I'm turning 50 in a couple of months. If you're looking for gift ideas, that's fine. I'm just joking. I'm not joking about turning 50. I am turning 50 in a couple of months.
Young pup.
Yeah, let's go with that. Because I feel old, especially with my broken knee. Anyway, it's just one of those things. Every time they raise the life, I said this, you or heard, the people at home didn't hear this. Every time they raise the life expectancy, I feel like I'm supposed to have another midlife crisis. Anyway, it's just one of those things. You know how you can throw a ball inside a car and it just kind of carries on with you? You know, you throw the ball and you're throwing it and it just, but I don't know that would work. The concept of being like
That definitely doesn't work on a cruise ship.
right. If you launch a cruise ship up, if you just go straight up, I'm pretty sure it would be going backwards at the speed of the cruise ship, right?
Take a ball out of your car window and let go of it.
Right. It carries on with you,
No, it doesn't.
but it starts slowing down.
No, it goes straight down.
No, because you're moving and the ball is moving and then you drop it and it keeps moving as your hand was moving. You drop it and it.
He's talking about inside the car.
No. I'm sorry, outside the car.
Outside, yeah.
My hand is moving, and so when I let go of the ball,
So on the ship, anyways, when you put the drone up, let me just say this: you're not holding onto it anymore.
I agree.
There's no relative thing. So it's as soon as you launch it in the air,
yeah. But
it has to. Keep
but it was moving along with the speed of the cruise ship when it was sitting on the ground, and then when you go up, doesn't it keep some of the momentum from going forward at first?
When I did this on a sailing boat, let me just say this: it went backwards fairly fast, and you have to make sure
You gotta keep up, yeah.
Right, and that's the thing. I was just thinking, I can imagine Simon being like, come on, catch up, as he's telling it to go faster and faster and faster towards off the back of the cruise ship.
They can go. DJI can go pretty quick.
Really faster than the cruise ship?
Yeah, the thing could fly 10 kilometers away. It could go at 60 kilometers an hour.
Nice. Cool. So
Not that, the bigger
Not
ones.
the bigger one. The Mini 2 does.
okay, very cool. So I should be able to keep up the cruise ship.
Yes.
Good to know. It's all good. I've never been on a cruise ship. Ferries are enough. I caught a ferry once between Aberdeen and Shetland, and that's terrifying. It's just something nice about when you go to sleep and they've got like you're in a bunk that has like walls because they're expecting that you're going to be hitting the walls and you have to strap yourself in because it's not calm sea in the North Sea between Aberdeen and Shetland. Anyway, dedicated single pool formerly known as SQLDW, not a thing anymore. It's basically end of life. It's not really an option. However, I also want to highlight, for most people, it wasn't right for them anyway. It was a very small market. In some ways, maybe Microsoft should never really have offered it. But if you did have billions of rows of data and so on, well, maybe. But in some ways, this was happening before big data was a thing. Certainly before big data was all the rage, PDW was coming through. Like Coca-Cola Amatil were tracking all their Coke bottles that they sold with it. That's a lot of data. But at the same time, like streaming services and all that kind of stuff, when people think about like big data, they think of like IoT and like trucking fleets that are sending a signal every few seconds about their locations, and you're picking that up through streaming services and dumping it across to a big data store. Which then brings us to the non-relational. Let me just kind of go here and go cloud relational for all of that, right? We'll add to it a bit more later, but for now I'll go cloud non-relational, and we start talking about things like Azure Cosmos DB for NoSQL, and for Apache Gremlin for graph stuff, right?
Mongo.
We've got Mongo. And these are all different products, right? There's also MongoDB Atlas for Azure, on Azure. Again, don't ask me about the branding, whatever. I don't know why it's one way or another. Speaking of Apache, there's also Azure Managed Instance, not the SQL Managed Instance, but Azure Managed Instance for Apache Cassandra, right? Azure Cache for Redis, not Reads. Redis? No, I did a typo. You weren't looking. Right. And this, of course, is before we actually talk about Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2, which of course came after Gen 1, and so on. And of course, Azure Blob Storage and Azure Table Storage, and which I always find fascinating that they want to say there is table storage when I'm just like, you've got databases. Anyway, I think it's more just about the fact that there are other companies that say that they do table storage, and Microsoft goes, we can as well. So they do this. I don't know anyone who actually uses Azure Table Storage. Anyway, HG Insight, if you want to think about that. And of course, then we get to things like Fabric Lakehouse. Right? Now, and I could come back up here. Sorry, I could come back up here and say Fabric Warehouse, and in the future, Fabric SQLDB. I'm going to leave Fabric SQLDB off because I don't think it should exist. No, because it's very much future. Fabric Warehouse is really just a layer on top of Fabric Lakehouse. Just a way that Lakehouse lets you query it through tables and lets you put metadata over the top of it for data types and security and all this kind of stuff. It's very useful. It means you can write T-SQL code against your OneLake data store. But realistically, it's just a front end like serverless SQL Pool was. Serverless SQL Pool is really a front end that understands SQL to non-relational data. And that's fine, because realistically, when you're dealing with either a document DB or dealing with a layer which understands Spark and so on, that's handling things okay. The concept of saying, well, we've got data that's streaming and it's just throwing it straight into data lake, that is not the end of the story for that data that ends up in data lake, right? It's not just a file system, is it? It's part of a Spark story with all Spark's magic of creating aggregations and, you know, having its own indexing type strategies. Because let's face it, if it was just the file system, it would be crap. The concept of saying, oh, we want unstructured data. No, you don't. Unstructured is really hard. If it's actually unstructured data, that's like just going, oh, I've got a computer here and I want to write queries against all the files. That's unstructured. You don't know what's in there, right? When you're storing data in something that is going to be useful, what we really mean by unstructured is really kind of structured at query time. And when I say query time, I don't mean when you run a query. I mean when Spark comes along and understands it and tries to make it better for you. We've got data that we've poured into data lake, sure. But Spark can go and understand that and be like, oh yeah, no, this is fine. This fits into that structure that I'm told this is okay with. If it doesn't, Spark needs to deal with that. And so Lakehouse in many ways is just kind of data lake with just extra layers around it. But all of these are really there for those times when you just go, well, relational isn't quite the story that we want. Let's talk about Redis for a minute, right? You ever deal with that situation where someone's like got a website and they're trying to manage sessions, and so they don't really have a way of doing that. And before Redis, they often used to use a table in SQL that would just have like, here's a GUID and here's the date of when we last validated that session. And they would try and figure out how to index that thing so that it was useful and all that kind of stuff. And quite often they would index the time because they'd just be like, because we frequently need to find the things that are too old and we need to expire them and so on. And I'd be like, no, but you need this to be lightning fast. And if you have this extra index on it, that's the one time that having extra indexes is a really bad idea. I'm just like, you just want this to be clustered on that GUID so that you can dive straight in and find that GUID and see what the time is to make sure that the session is still valid. And if it expires, don't bother yourself with that. If it expires and you go, oh, I've got this GUID, oh, it's too old, then you can say, hey, that's not a valid session anymore. But when you need to come along and go, we need to get rid of all our expired GUIDs, you don't need to do that really ever. You might want to do it every so often by just kind of going, okay, we're gonna have like a few seconds downtime on our website to be able to go and clear some of these out. In which case, you're just going to scan through it all and just go, yeah, drop, get rid of them. You don't need them to be. You don't need an index on that. Where you're going, I've got all of these ones that are good and all of these ones that are bad. No, you may as well just leave them there, and then at some point you just go, let's just wipe the table out. Have a moment's downtime, and just go, there are no sessions active at the moment. Great, bang, the table's gone, and we restart it. Right? But because so many people are doing such a bad job of session management in a relational database, because I saw it over and over and over, and I'd be just like, do this and this and this, and it's fine. And then Redis popped up, and they were like, oh yeah, this works, that's fine. I'm like, well, cool. Because basically what it was just doing was just going, we're doing this and we're storing it in RAM, if the machine goes down, that's fine. We don't care. We can lose that cache. That's okay. The cache, right? That data store. It only really needs to live in RAM. And I would always be like, well, that's fine. I can handle that in SQL to make it blindingly fast. I can make it an in-memory only table. All of this. SQL was okay at that. It's just that almost everybody in the world did it badly and made an opportunity for something like Redis to pop up and do it better. And I feel like a lot of the NoSQL stuff, a lot of the non-relational stuff, is for all those people who do relational badly, right? And that's fine. I don't want to actually say it's the wrong thing to do. I'm saying because when enough people are doing something badly, yeah, make a product that does it better by default, and that's going to work. So for an analytics environment, the idea about being able to go, I want to just pour data into this thing. If you put it in relational, people are just like, oh, I want to be able to update that data and change it and then mark this dimension as being not the latest one and all that kind of stuff. It's just like, no, you should have an insert-only database. And as soon as you say the words insert-only database, the NoSQL people are just like, well, yeah, right? Because really, insert only is kind of NoSQL by default. That's how that works. If you're suddenly going, oh, I want to do a whole bunch of updates to my data that's in data lake, yeah, good luck with that. That's not how that works. You need to query it back, change it, and write it out again, and so on. It doesn't support just updates. So in many ways, relational is still great, but people can do relational worse, and non-relational really kind of kicks in. So from a pure database perspective, our landscape, cloudscape if you want, is there, like all of this stuff, I feel like is there to replace the concept of going, we've got SQL Server. Oh, SQL Agent, we've got like Elastic Jobs in the cloud for being able to have scheduled things. You can schedule Data Factory. Data Factory, of course, is the replacement for integration services, except that then in Synapse gave us pipelines, which was a cut-down version of Azure Data Factory. And then Fabric have pipelines, which is a cut-down version of Synapse pipelines. I still like Azure Data Factory because it's more functional. And my worry about one of my worries about Fabric is that they're putting Fabric SQL DB together. It's been talked about at conferences and so on, so I'm allowed to say this. And it's going to be a cut-down version of Azure SQL DB. And I'm like, no. I wish that they would go, Azure SQL Database is like a first-class cousin of Fabric and talks very nicely with Fabric. You can have mirroring, which takes stuff in Fabric and mirrors it across to a Fabric Lakehouse, so that you can have your tables that you're not trying to put a transactional workload on, just mirror it out. You just maintain the tables that you always have been in Azure SQL Database for your warehouse. And it just copies it all across to one lake and gives you the full Fabric experience. Nice. Cool. But with Fabric SQL DB, I feel like people are going to try and run transactional workloads on there, and it's not going to be the right answer. And it's not going to have all the functionality of Azure SQL DB, and it's going to make my life less fun for a while. We'll see how it goes.
These are consulting opportunities for you.
Of saying don't go to Fabric SQL DB. Yeah, sure.
Charge for that.
Sorry? I know. I can charge people for that advice. Sure. I'm not going to get any referrals from Microsoft, are they? No one from Microsoft on here still? Melissa?
Yeah, Melissa.
That's all right. Anyway, I'm not going to be getting any referrals from Microsoft for saying don't go to Fabric SQL DB. Anyway, one of those things. But yeah, so SQL Agent had to get replaced by a few things. Elastic Jobs, managed instance for SQL Agent bits, sure, and scheduled triggers in
Functions.
Data Factory, right? But But in many ways, the on-prem thing was just so much easier to think about with that. Reporting services is now realistically paginated reports inside Power BI. Power BI is part of the Fabric space, and we can't really forget that. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm just going to be like an analytics kind of a thing, or other, right? So we got like Azure Data Factory, Synapse pipelines, Fabric pipelines. I should make this bigger, right, so you can see what I'm doing here, right? These are the kind of the integration services bits. Reporting services has Power BI as far as the paginated reports bit, which is kind of the equivalent for reporting services. And Power BI, the semantic models, being the equivalent of analysis services, right? Bearing in mind, analysis services used to, 15 plus years ago, have a multi-dimensional engine, and then they introduced the tabular engine because Microsoft got this technology called Vertipack, which first of all appeared inside Excel and inside the column store indexes inside PDW. And so it was what made PDW go really fast. And then they put column store indexes into SQL itself using the same Vertipack technology. And suddenly PDW wasn't hundreds of times faster than SQL because SQL had the same thing in it. It was making it go a whole heap faster. But then the same technology went into analysis services and tabular. And Power BI's modeling was that same analysis. If you've got Power BI report server, Power BI on, like on-prem, it's the same executable as analysis services, right? If you've got analysis services running and Power BI report server, you see the same file running twice, once for analysis services, once for Power BI report server, because it's the same. So for a little while, we had Azure analysis services, and these days it's just Power BI.
Will be done in 5.
Yeah, that's cool. So the concept of analysis services has become Power BI part of Fabric. Integration services, reporting services, those analysis services, Power BI, integration services, those things. Column store is just part of what we've got with SQL. And so we are at a point kind of like now, but only really quite recently, that we pretty much have parity of what we had when we were here on the server. We've got all of the non-relational stuff to replace the file system. We've got Fabric stuff for those on-prem BI bits finally coming to the party. SQL agent stuff has come through with triggers and so on, and SQL, even the multiple database engines with managed instance.
Interesting how long it's taken to get there.
It's taken a long time, and still some of the orchestration of stuff is, it's different. Mind you, we also used to have master data services, which Microsoft doesn't provide an equivalent for, but the people who wrote master data services in the first place was a company called Prophecy, and you can run Prophecy for your master data stuff without having master data services in play anymore. So
Purview doesn't do the same as
Purview is different.
Mm.
It's not managing master data in the same way that the Prophecy stuff does.
Mm.
Right. And it's crazy expensive. Purview is another kind of separate, like, add-on type piece for it. When we think about Databricks, it's kind of a model for being able to handle stuff with pipelines and all that kind of stuff, and a style of being able to move the data from somewhere to somewhere, ready for Spark and all that kind of stuff. So it kind of counts as a product in some ways. It didn't really have an equivalent from beforehand, and it's certainly part of the Synapse story that's now becoming part of the Fabric story, as all of everything is analytics has become branded as Fabric. But this concept of the data cloudscape involving all of this really means that what's happened is that Microsoft have come up with some things to be able to give databases in the cloud. And then there's been gaps that have been filled up with all kinds of different things. And Microsoft has brought out some things to address some gaps, and other people have brought out other things to fill in other gaps. But now what I feel like is that if you're on-prem still, that's totally fine. Don't ever feel like you're less in any way by being on-prem. But do try to seek to understand what the cloud equivalent would be of all the stuff that you've got going on with your on-prem data environments. Because all your Office stuff has moved to the cloud, your SharePoint stuff has moved to the cloud, you've moved most things, right, to the cloud. Your Active Directory is now in Entra ID, and all of this kind of stuff. And as far as data is concerned, whatever it is that you're doing which makes your environment special and worth being on-prem, it's not a thing anymore. If you're worried about security, well, you've got private endpoints. Reed can help you get them set up, right? There's all kinds of different things, right? There are still some things that you just go, oh, really? Huh? I'm not a fan of the security in Fabric yet. But, and analysis service is not quite the same inside Power BI and all this kind of stuff. And yes, there's pricing considerations and so on with all of this. But what we've got, I feel like it used to be, we've got all this and the cloud equivalent just has a whole ton of gaps. It doesn't feel like that anymore. It now feels like the cloud is so complex, but there's nowhere that doesn't have an equivalent in the cloud. But certainly, it's a very different kind of landscape, cloudscape, that we're dealing with now. Anyway,
Interesting.
thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Rob.
I would encourage you to, especially explore Fabric, explore what's going on with Fabric and so on. There's some neat stuff there around like Direct Lake and so on. I've got whole sessions about Direct Lake, which is the concept of you put stuff into the Fabric Lakehouse, and because the Lakehouse stores data in the same way that the Vertipack stuff does, the same way that Power BI does, which means that then you can have a model inside Power BI, which is already kind of pre-processed, living there in the Fabric Lakehouse. So you have a lakehouse and you tell it that you create tables based on it that are presented through the Fabric warehouse layer, which is just the SQL endpoint, so you can query the data that's in the lakehouse, as I mentioned, right? But then Power BI goes, oh, that's already in the format that I would need it in, and you can just go make a model based on that. And as you pour data in, your Power BI model just goes, oh, sure, I can see all those changes coming through. You don't need to just go, oh, and now refresh, and half an hour later, you see the new data. It's just constantly keeping up to date. I have a presentation where I run through all the reasons why it's not quite like that. But there's some fascinating things going on with data, but really there has been for 15 years. It's just that it keeps tweaking and changing and becoming, here's this and here's this, oh, but that and all this, and so I encourage you to consider the thing and how you would solve that in the cloud, or how to solve that in Fabric or whatever you're thinking about moving to, so that you can then see what it would align with, understanding that might change. But anything that you've got that you have not yet moved to the cloud, you're starting to run out of excuses for doing that. Anyway, I've been Farley. You can reach me. My My name is Rob Farley. You know this. My email is rob@lobsterpot.com.au. I am Rob_Farley at most things like X and so on. You can find me at LinkedIn, all that kind of stuff.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob.
I've got to tell this to ignore the
Squiggle.
squiggle. Yeah,
Add to dictionary.
I do indeed. I should add that. Anyway,
Thanks, Rob.
thank you. I've been Rob. I will remain Rob. You won't catch me at the Fringe in 2025, but you'll see me around the place.
Steve or Reid or Hussein, you got any questions for Rob?
No.
Reid, all good?
Everyone else dropped
Steve?
out because I sent it to sleep. That's all good.
I think we've lost a few, but Steve, still with us?
I'm still here. I'm not sure if you can hear me or not. Can you hear me?
We can, loud and clear.
We hope that you
Excellent.
haven't said anything before now because this is the first we've heard from you.
Exactly. I did earlier, but obviously maybe I didn't unmute. Good walkthrough of a lot of history and good times in the past, Rob. Thank you for that. What are your thoughts on?
Has changed a lot over the years, as you would have heard. But you knew this already.
What are your thoughts on cloud native databases and data warehouses like Snowflake and the like? Where do you think they fit in with this journey? Are they ahead or are they?
Well, I think in many ways it's the whole thing of they did what they did because they were trying to fill in gaps that they didn't think were really being addressed properly. They figured that they had stuff to offer the world, but Snowflake has some strong partnerships going on with Fabric, such that if you've been doing Snowflake stuff, well, realistically, it's all just data. I've got clients who use Oracle. I don't care. It's just people have data. If you're thinking about going to Snowflake, sure, that's fine. If you're thinking about moving off the Microsoft platform completely, look, that's a heck of a move. But at the end of the day, it might be right for you. Snowflake is certainly right for a lot of organizations. If you're trying to be a Microsoft shop, I don't know that I would try and jump too heavily into Snowflake, but realistically, it might be good. Kids these days who go through and get data science degrees, which of course wasn't a thing in my day. I did AI and machine learning and so on, but data science is, I don't know, different to that apparently. And they get taught a lot of stuff outside the Microsoft space. They don't learn about. I don't think they learn so much about Fabric and so on. We're still using a camera.
Yep. Cool. But we got to be out of the office by 5, so we're going to wrap up.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
So I think they're great. Cloud native environments, they're great. I think if they're right for you, absolutely jump in and use them. I have done less with them because people see me as a Microsoft specialist, and so they don't call me to say, "Can you come and help us with our Snowflake environment?" And I don't have an employer that sends me to go and work on that stuff. But at the end of the day, I'm not scared by anything like that. But, all good. Cool question.
Cool.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Steve.
Steve. Thanks, Rob.